Hi everyone, welcome to our 35th video session. Today we're interviewing Kennedy Ekezie-Joseph. But before we get started, we're going to introduce a little bit about Impaction and what we do on video sessions. So Impaction is a community where we aim to inspire and support people around the world to create a positive difference in their local communities, especially young social entrepreneurs and students. And on video sessions, we learned that the power of collaboration is strong, especially when you talk to people face to face. So video sessions is a way to connect people all around the world. So we're joined by our community members and we're joined by Kennedy today. So before we get started, if we can introduce ourselves in 2 sentences or less. Kennedy will have a separate introduction for you and then you can lead right into your presentation. But I'll start off. I'm Shivani. I'm one of the co-founders of Impaction. I'm based in Chicago, Illinois, and I also work at Chicago Public Schools as a budget and grants analyst. Tanvi, do you want to go next?
Hi everyone, I'm Tanvi. I'm the product manager with Impaction. I'm based in Boston, and I'm also a product manager at another Boston-based company. Lacey, you want to go next?
Hello, I'm Lacey. I work with Impaction and help with their social media, and I'm based in Southern West Virginia.
Thank you, Lacey. Roger, go for it.
I'm Roger. I'm out of Boston. I work with a company called Afri-tech, supporting early stage founders.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, Kennedy, I'm going to give a brief introduction for you, and then you can provide your own as well. But yeah, today, like I said, we're interviewing and speaking to Kennedy, the CEO of Africave. Africave connects global organizations to elite software engineering talent from Africa. Amongst others, Kennedy has also won President Obama's Young African Leaders Fellowship and the Resolution Fellowship. He is a One Young World Ambassador and presented a keynote at the United Nations Youth Assembly and has had 2 TEDx talks. In 2017, Kennedy was named one of the top 30 teens in the world by WAFF. So thank you, Kennedy, for joining us today. And yeah, if you want to introduce yourself and then lead right into the presentation, we'd appreciate it.
Of course. So I'll just share my screen and really can dive into the presentation, because I think my introduction is going to be like 20 minutes long, and so I'll just do that. Does everyone see my screen? Oh, no, not yet. It work?
Yes, it works.
Oh, great. So yeah, thanks. It's really great to be talking to you all this Sunday evening. So I'm in Lagos, Nigeria right now, and it's 5 p.m. by me, and it's such a great way to get my week started off. I'm very inspired by the opportunity to share my story and tap into a community, no matter how small, of people who are passionate about similar goals as I am. So as you all know, my name is Kennedy, and I'm from Nigeria. I was born and bred in Nigeria, born and raised in Nigeria. I'm 21, and I was born in 98, less than 3 days after one of the biggest dictators in Nigeria's history, died suddenly. And my mom has a joke that's not so funny, that it was the excitement of his death that made her go into labor to give birth to me. And I think why I'm telling that story is because at the time, I'm trying to paint a picture of what Nigeria was at the time. So we're transitioning from being a military state to a democracy. And as many of us may know, during transitions like that, it's characterized by violence, economic meltdowns. And at the time, Nigeria was slapped with so many sanctions from international organizations, the UN, the World Bank, etc. And a lot of the foreign direct investment which the government relied on to power the economy stopped coming in. And so, it took toll on the everyday citizen, and my family was no exception. So, my dad had a small printing business, and that ran into the ground. And so it was a very difficult time economically just around when I was born. And this was, at least statistically, it's, one of the worst times in recent Nigerian history to be born, in the country. And for me, that was really interesting, because then we got to spend a lot of time together with, my parents. They were out of jobs, so they picked us up from school. We got to really spend a lot of time with them. And one of the things, especially my mom, continues to tell us was, you're pursuing an education not just for the sake of that, but that can be made useful if you equip yourself to be someone who contributes to the society at large. And just culturally, where I come from, it's you owe a responsibility to your family first. And when you owe that responsibility to your family, then you owe it to the community and then to the country at large before you think of the global scale. And this was the sort of upbringing I had, and I think this kind of stayed with me all through. So I won a scholarship that enabled me to go to secondary school, because my parents weren't really able to afford, to send me to a good secondary school. So for me, it was for most of my young age, as a result of everything I've described, there was some sort of necessity. It was out of necessity that I had to manifest the highest potential to get anything I wanted. So if you wanted to get good education, then manifest your highest potential, be the best in class, get the scholarship, go to school, and you have to continue to excel to retain that. And so this was really the climb around my upbringing, and it was an incredibly interesting time for me. I never felt like despite the fact that my family was definitely not wealthy, I never felt like I lacked anything, because I did have the most important gift from my family, which was that gift of self-awareness and encouragement, which I think very many people lack. So did all of this, and I got into university at 16, and so I would say that really marked the beginning of my journey as an entrepreneur. So and that was heralded by two reasons. The first is when I got into university, I joined the Debating Society, and what that did was give me the opportunity to really interact with people who were not like me, people from different tribes, religions, ethnicities, races, and socioeconomic status than I was, and it really broadened my horizon and bequeathed me with a unique sense of emotional intelligence, I would say. And I debated for my university all through my 4 years in college. And simultaneously at the time, in my first year, I founded a non-profit organization that helps contribute to advocacy efforts to end the practice of female genital mutilation. And I'm happy to even answer more questions about that, because that will be the focus of the short presentation I'll do today. But what we did with the organization was galvanize a community of young people in the state where I grew up, and we worked with the legislature, worked with local community chiefs, and got this practitioners of the culture to denounce the practice. Designed new alternative rites of passage, because for many communities, the reason why the practice of female genital mutilation happened was the rite of passage. So for a lot of the women, the symbol of passage from girlhood to womanhood, and that generally happened in way over 70% of the cases when these girls were 12, between 12 and 13, and so we successfully helped that in many countries. So right after college, I worked for a bit with Accenture, which is a global management consultancy, before I went to grad school, and so transitioned from my role as the executive director and leader of this organization, which I founded when I was 16, into being a full-time student sort of, when I was in grad school, the idea of Africave started, and I'll tell you it was motivated by a chain of reasons. Because for me, for every conference I've spoken at, for everyone I've met, they usually ask me a question, especially when I meet parents, right? How can we create more young people like you? How can my son, how can my daughter become like, like you? And for me, it was an interesting question, right? Because I started getting asked this when I was a teenager, and my default response to that was to smile very shyly, or wave it off with a modest comment, because I didn't know what that meant, right? Because what does it mean when someone says, how can we create more people like you? Firstly, there's an underlying assumption that you're something. There's something in you that they're trying to replicate across various situations. And I didn't exactly know what that was. I had a general idea, but more specifically, it was a more underlying question, like, who am I? And I'm sure many of us have asked ourselves that question, who really am I? And when we answer that, we default to sociological appellations to describe ourselves. So who am I? I'm a grad student at say Harvard, and then maybe next year you graduate, and when you graduate, say you become a consultant at McKinsey, and then you lose your job. Then who are you? So for me, it was a deep underlying need to define ourselves. And my identity beyond the social description of who I am, and this involved an articulation of values and foundations upon which I want to build out the rest of my life. And this was me as a teenager thinking about this, right? So it's like I'd barely spent any time on earth, and I had to deal with this very complex questions, and that really wasn't the walk in the park for me. Anyway, so Africave was really a response to that, because so it's based off the fact that, and maybe I can just dive into what we're about. I don't want to definitely get technical while talking about this, but currently Africa is the fastest growing continent, the world's largest untapped human capital pool. So there are 1.2 billion people on the continent, and it's also the youngest continent in the world. So the average age on the continent is 19.5 years, and way younger than all other continents in the world. However, it also is the largest untapped human capital pool, and by 2050, 1/3 of the world is going to be from Africa. And for me, this was an incredible question, because having spent a lot of time working in communities, having spent a lot of time in the past 5 years interacting with young people and working with them, it was some sort of cognitive dissonance. On the one hand, I've met some of the most incredible people who are changing their communities and the world with their bare hands, without access to resources, no support, no families, little to no education, but are really doing incredible stuff. But on the other hand, it's just seeing how much the distance between where we are and where we should be. And for me, Africave was an attempt to really close that by investing in training the next generation of the most technically competent people on the continent, but also giving the world an opportunity to tap into Africa and experience Africa firsthand. And so we formed a problem statement around this and did a lot of research, spoke to a lot of companies, and one of the things we found out, as I'm sure everyone knows, is currently there's a huge demand for software engineering talent. 2 million jobs at the end of this year would go unfilled. And for a lot of companies, they spend so much. So the average company spends $23,000. For a Google and Microsoft, that's okay. But for smaller sized companies and startups, that's a lot for them to spend. And even after spending this, almost 30% of the talent still churn due to a skill set misalignment. And so this problem, combined with the statistic, which I shared around the talent pool on the continent of Africa, presents a unique opportunity. But from my interactions with a lot of people, there was then a layer of problem. How do they really tap into and validate the skill set of the technology talent that comes from the continent? And so that's where we really come in as Africave. We're trying to use not just artificial intelligence, but our local context and knowledge of the ecosystem to validate the skill set and provide access to some of the best digital talent on the continent. And really our big goal is to become the one-stop shop, the gateway between the rest of the world and Africa's best and brightest talent. And in the future, we probably would, pivot into pivot into advising companies that are interested in Africa, want to do business here, really helping them build bridges between the continent and the rest of the world. And that's really our goal. And it's more than that. For us, it's an opportunity to create unfettered access to opportunity for the brilliant minds on the continent who otherwise wouldn't have this. So, impact success is the way we go about recruiting our talent. I would skip this. This is very and so, my co-founders, one of them is my brother, my younger brother. We're 1 year apart, and we've really spent a lot of time growing up, as you can imagine, together. And Valentine is a good old friend of ours, and we've come together, decided to let everything else go to really build this. And it's just unique that we share a collective vision for what we're trying to do on the continent, and so it was an incredibly easy fit. Just in terms of our advisors, and I'm trying as much as possible not to make this sound like a pitch. We're advised by people who have really built experience in the market we're trying to serve, so the US and Europe, but also the market where we are sourcing talent from, which is Africa. Spencer spent almost his whole career working in Africa. Hemant grew up in Nigeria for the first 17 years of his life. Libby is married to an African, has spent a lot of time building out Oprah Winfrey's Academy in Johannesburg, and SAP, as we all know, is a global giant with footprint on the continent. And for us, from this slide, I really want to focus on the value proposition for the developers. So the talent we recruit who work with us, who currently find it difficult to get great jobs, we're breaking down the artificial barriers of border for them, and helping them build their global competence to earn a salary that's commensurate with global standards. And what this does, as we see, is it helps them become, for many of them, they're the highest earners in their family ever, because they're now able to take care of their siblings, able to contribute to their parents, meager wages for the most part, and help take care of their home. So this is just more than building out a business and and building out tech products, but it's about building impact and creating a community that has the skill to succeed and go into the future where 1/3 of the world will be from here. And we continuously provide them with mentorship from some of the best in class mentors at Fortune 500 companies. We have Olympic athletes who mentor some of our talent. We have scientists. Oops, I need to plug in my battery. Silicon Valley entrepreneurs who mentor our talent. And again, I'll skip the talent selection process. One of the things we really focus on is recruiting for potential. So beyond just skill set, we as much as possible try to recruit for potential, and we stake our bet on some of the best people, invest in upskilling them when need be, and then offshore them. And yeah, so that's in a nutshell. That's it about Africave. But I'll just exit this. But I would say for me, my North Star is to build socioeconomically prosperous nations on the continent of Africa. And one of the things that really keeps me grounded, and one of the things I've learned for sure, is the importance of having a community that supports you. And for me, this has been my family, this has been my network of friends, this has been fellow entrepreneurs who have known me from when I started, and continue to stay with me. This is mentors. And I think there's a caveat to that, because for many people, when we find ourselves enmeshed in communities, we lose our sense of self and just become, an echo of what the community wants. But one of the things I think has been very useful and vital to me is the ability to maintain a sense of self and individuality even while in the group. So it's like when when it's raining in your heart, there's nowhere to go. So it feels like you have to carry around your own sunshine, and know who you are, articulate a sense of values for what you want, because it's very easy to lose that as you go down the road. Or why exactly did I start this? And when you think about it, God, in 1 year, I've veered very far from my initial goal and initial target. So that's been something very important I've learned. But even more importantly, the need to have hard conversations, the need to go beyond the polarizations of race, of politics, because as young people, we have a world to build. There's very hard problems we have to solve, and we can't solve that by being at the throats of each other every second, on Twitter, in person. Like we do have the enormity of the problems we have to solve are incredible, and that requires us to come together to support each other, and to invest in each other's growth and ourselves. One of our company refrains at Africave is, and we tell this to all our employees, to show up in excellence even when no one is looking, and to do hard things, to do the right thing even when it's hard. So for me, these are some of the things that continue to keep me going on my journey. I'll stop there, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions, and I'm happy to answer them while I plug my battery in.
Thank you, Kennedy. That, especially like that message towards the end, was really inspirational. And I mean, I have a couple of questions. One for impact Africave is making, and I know that you touched on it before, but can you lead us through a little bit what that looks like? I mean, you told us about like the people that you're trying to help and how to tap into untapped talent in like the African continent. But can you tell us a little bit more about how that looks, and I mean, what are some of the things that you want to achieve through the social impact initiative?
That's a great question. So give me one quick second. So for us, our goal is to we're trying to solve a couple of problems. Some of them are more short term, others are very complex and long term. But our immediate focus is one, to solve the unemployment problem. So the average unemployment rate on the continent for people aged 18 to 35 is 43%. So 43% of the young people, and bear in mind that for our continent, the talent is basically that's what we have. That's the only thing that would juggle the continent forward. And so our goal is to get that number down by investing in building bridges between brilliance and opportunity. And so we're a very young company where we incorporated in Nigeria much less than 6 months ago, but fully went full time and started our full time operations in sometime in November. And so what that looks like right now is we employ 8 people and connect them to jobs in the US and in London and Copenhagen, and for us, our goal is to continue to grow that number, right? So 8 is a small number. However, just in terms of the impact, the impact on their families and their communities, you really can't put a number on that. So for us, we're looking to continue to invest in the training, the upskilling of people, and our recent partnership with SAP is going to help us do that. So we're going to be we're hosting what's called the Africa Code Week, and Africave is an implementing partner for that, and then we're specifically targeting fresh high school graduates, and exposing them to technology, and after that we're going to take them on and continue with them till their talent level gets to a point where that can serve in the labor market, and they can become full-time employees. But on the broad scale, that's our goal. But on the high level, we're really looking to push Africa, to push young people beyond just catching up into a mecca of culture, of influence, of innovation, and we're here to ensure that.
That's great. And I mean, especially like investing in a younger generation just to change what it means to have a sustainable future is really important. I want to open up to the community. Does anyone have any thoughts or questions? Yeah, before we ask the next one.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, either one, both Roger and Randall spoke. Whoever wants to go first.
Roger's fine.
All right, go for it.
Okay. All right. So it sounds like you built up a good dev shop out there and some great branding around it. I'm curious if there's if the company's wading into the market, you're going to be going up against Ukrainian shops, South American shops, Russian shops, shops out in Singapore. Is the idea to compete against them, I guess on price plus the branding message, or is in what sounds like you're setting up some kind of value-added reseller thing with SAP, which is fantastic that they've gotten involved in this. Is there another angle on the business model, or is the plan to kind of step up to the plate against those folks for a little while, and then try to iterate to something unique about your specific shop later?
Oh, absolutely. So we're looking to invest in building technology that we can license to companies too. So leveraging our talent pool, building out this technology to license to companies in the future. But right now it's beyond just being, I wouldn't even describe us as a dev shop, but we're really helping companies manage their remote engineering teams by tapping into a resource pool that they probably wouldn't ordinarily consider. So yes, winning on price, trying to compete and win on the message, but also trying to compete and win on the opportunity to tap into a talent pool that's going to continue to grow. So according to GitHub, we're currently the fastest growing continent for software engineers, and just given this huge dearth of talent, companies are going to increasingly look to untapped pockets of talent to meet their demand. And so we're trying to give these companies the opportunity to be like early movers into the continent and to build out their remote distributed team practice with talent from the continent.
So then the launch in that case is, as you were talking about, developing the talent to a level where it's on par with everybody else around the world, and then pushing on price to start. I'm just trying to get a sense of how you're trying to enter the market, since you did launch in November, and what I'm really curious about is what kind of pushback you've been getting, because there's a lot of people in this game. It's really competitive, and I'm curious what kind of challenges you've run into on the sales side to develop new clients. And I'm wondering if anything that I brought up has been an issue as you've been out selling.
Oh, I mean, there are definitely questions that come up, but we've not noticed them as like very huge pushbacks. So again, I think that definitely that's because of our scale right now, which is not as big as it would be, say, by the end of the year, and I'm sure those questions would get to pop up more. However, the most important thing is like the talent quality. So we try to be as transparent during the selection process and really work with the companies that we're trying to serve, our customers, to provide them as much transparency around the talent selection process, provide them interview videos, results from tests, and as much as possible, like the quality would always speak for itself. And once that quality is right, then companies are always very happy to hand. The other logistical things around time difference, we're baking element into our business model to cater for that, like guaranteeing a 6-hour overlap every day, no matter where you are in the world. Setting them up in premium office spaces. Ensuring that we have like security compliances for data, privacy and confidentiality, and all of the other questions that would normally come up as it just regards seamless engagement.
And I know that those were harsh, and I didn't mean to.
No, absolutely.
It's really cool what you're doing. No, it's really cool. And we'll connect later. It's just awesome to hear. Like, this is really cool. This is really.
Of course.
I was coming out of the gate like, what's good? But it's just how I am. I'm sorry.
No, it's perfectly fine. Thanks for asking questions.
Maribel, you had a question, right?
Okay, so mine was more of a comment, and one of the things that Kennedy said, which resonated, less about the sales and business model, since your business is very far from what I understand from the things I normally look into. But there was something about values that really struck me, and you said the idea of one, investing in each other's growth. It seemed very like communal, and the other one was showing up in excellence when no one is looking. I think it's one that I haven't heard of much when I look at company values. It's pretty unique. And I remember myself growing up, and there's a word in Spanish, at least Colombian Spanish, when you don't do that, when you actually like hide something that you do as a kid, which is morongo or moronga. And the idea that now, it's coming back to this idea of, be yourself and be your best version of yourself, no matter where you are, no matter who's looking. So that really struck. I thought that was special. And yeah, just really interesting values that you have there.
Thanks. It comes from, I would say, my community and just the communal nature of, values that were instilled in me, that like you're only as successful as your neighbor. And so this, the whole idea of individual exceptionalism is really, it doesn't make very much sense, because then when you're successful and your neighbor is not, then they'll come for you. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Kennedy, you started to speak a little bit about the challenges that you're facing, especially in the market, and especially around talent transparency. What are some of the other challenges that you are facing? Does it have to do with like even understanding like the legitimacy in an overlooked market? A lot of people, especially in our experience, we turn to like more Asian countries to look for engineering talent. And I mean, why has this space been overlooked for so long?
Oh yeah, there's also like a cultural barrier in that sense that we have to overcome, because one, not only are we asking companies to outsource, we're saying outsource to Africa, and so it's a market that they currently don't look at, but they probably should, for all of the reasons I mentioned. And I would say us being non-US founders, but also looking primarily to the US to source talent, that poses an uphill battle in itself. And so we're working to devise customer acquisition strategy that would help us overcome that in a unique way. So that's definitely one of the things that's challenging. But also internally, and I was telling my team this, I do not quite, and again, we're quite young in the process. I would say there's some more sophistication that we have to attain when it comes to finding and validating and onboarding talent skill set in very short time, because right now it takes about 10 days, and we're trying to, at scale, we're trying to bring that down a little bit. Once we finish building out our technology, that would help us do that. But we're trying to become a lot more sophisticated at that. But yeah, especially as regards the time to hire. But again, all of the other challenges are just the complexities of doing business on the continent. The fact, for example, electricity is not always guaranteed, so we have to pay for that. We have to pay for electricity generators sometimes. We especially when we're working out of office. So all of those are the exciting challenges that we can't really do away with, but come with the problem we're trying to solve. So but the first one is definitely the major one.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about, I mean, you said you had 10 days to validate talent skill sets. So can you tell us about like how you end up validating individual talent, and then why you want to even pare it down to a shorter period of time? I mean, 10 days doesn't seem like it's too long of a time to validate someone like that.
Oh yeah. So what goes into that process is we curate a pool, and when we have demand, we design like tests and mock platforms and apps that we give them to build. We give them about 5 to 6 days to build that. And for the most promising candidates, virtually same day they submit, they get that back to us, or the following day within a 24-hour time window. We schedule interviews. We take them through like simple psychometric tests using platforms like SHL, for example, and ultimately, select those who are best a mutual fit. But that's time consuming for us. The reason why we're trying to cut that down is because at scale, we want our processes to get even leaner and leaner, right? So we don't have to spend a lot of cost hiring additional staff, and we can scale with in a way that's cost efficient and that keeps our costs low, and enables us to maximize revenue. So yeah, that's why we have to get leaner.
So there's a cost associated with finding the right talent for each individual person, for the mock-ups, everything that they have to go through, right? Is it like a tangible monetary cost that's associated, or is it just time?
So right now, it's the monetary costs aren't as tangible, again, because of the scale. So we do have like partnerships with local accelerators, boot camps within our networks too. So that's quite easier, and it's more the time investment. But again, at scale, these are some of the things which would require like monetary costs, because we're trying to rapidly hire and would have to invest, and our acquisition costs are going to definitely jump. So we're trying to optimize our processes to ensure that they like from a unit economic perspective, they make sense.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay,
Yeah.
Cool. So does anyone from the community have thoughts, questions? Kennedy? Now I can keep going. All right. I'll go for it, Roger.
So now I think I might have had it wrong before. I did think of it as a dev shop, and you said it wasn't, but now it sounds more like customer at the end of the day. Are they hiring these people as like internal employees, or are they paying you all a consulting fee that then there's a split that you're paying out to the worker, or are you taking on whole projects and working on those?
Oh, so our customers look to hire them full-time, long-term, and they are like just local full-time members of their engineering teams. The only difference is they work remotely. So they pay us, and the contract with the developers and the talent that's signed with us. So we pay them the monthly salaries and insurance and all the, I guess you guys call it 401k benefits. Yeah. So
okay.
Yeah.
So your handle. Okay. So they're employees and you're good. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So there's always three ways to do it. Either have a direct hire, what you're talking about, or just giving you guys the whole project and you figure out how to do it out like that. And then you had mentioned earlier trying to do like some white labeling stuff, which is another thing you do. And maybe there's not another way to do this, but I'm curious if you've got any like big ideas that aren't standard for the market in terms of how to get more people from the continent into on projects in one form or another, throughout the world. Other than I guess those four, and it might not be that there is another way. I don't know. I'm just curious if there's anything like 10 years down the road, like the dream way to have the relationship between the developer and the company. Is there a dream to change that in any sort of way compared to what it is right now?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. That's also, one that we think about. And the honest truth is we've not quite figured that answer out just yet. And, all of this is going to serve as a very, huge learning experience for us. And we're staying flexible, staying, adaptable, and as we continue to grow, adapting and seeing where the market goes. So one of the things, as is as in the early stages of entrepreneurship, you're building out a business, but as you get more sophisticated, one of the things that come is your ability to really see the future, and build out responses to the future. So for us, we're going into this with as much intellectual humility as possible, and are learning as we go. But that's a question we do have on our minds, and we are looking to answer.
So I have a question. So
Yes, please.
what are things that we can do to help support you and your cause? What are like some like low effort ways that this community is built around action? So we're always asking about entrepreneurs' asks, and also things that we can contribute in our daily lifestyle that can help further your mission.
Oh, absolutely. So I think one thing that would be very helpful in line with our current milestones would be if maybe people can make just one introduction to anyone in their networks who will be happy to use us, or at least provide great feedback around our model, or their would have advice for us. That would be very helpful. So one person who you think would be happy to use us down the road, and even if no one comes to mind, just keeping that your mind. And I'm happy to share any documents with you that would be helpful for that introduction. That's one thing I think would be very helpful.
Great, yeah, I know our community is always happy to help. And the second question is, what's one piece of advice that you would give our community of social innovators, entrepreneurs, students, just social impact-minded people?
Oh yeah, I think it's one advice which I try to imbibe in my own life and journey, and I think it's again the humility, because in the course of our journeys, like for me, it's a big question. We shouldn't do our work with a notion of heroism. We shouldn't think we're all good and have the potential to change the world and become without faults. So it's to not be blind to our faults, and to not be blind to them because we want to improve upon them, and that's the only way we can truly create meaningful change in the world, and not go into it with a cloak of purity, moral, social, intellectual purity, because none of us has that. So to every day call ourselves out, be really self-conscious, and think about how we can make incremental progress, and better position ourselves to be people who can change the world, and even more importantly, just have open minds to receiving feedback and seeking help when need be. One of the things I've found in Africave has taught me is just when you're trying to do anything that's big enough, you experience your ignorance, your foolishness, your ineptitude, way more times than you would normally. So it's like you definitely need an incredible amount of humility to overcome all of that and then be someone who is truly good at what you do. So I think those would be the sort of advice which I'll give.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really important. I mean, those are all the questions that I had. Does anyone have any questions, comments for Kennedy before, we sign off for the day? Go for it, Marla.
Okay, this one's a little bit on the heavier side. I think I just want to put this out there as food for thought, seeing that you're on the side of outsourcing that's part of another country. I'm sure you're aware of the social issues within the countries in, for instance, the United States or the UK, where outsourcing has really affected families who normally would have a job, and then all of a sudden they're not employed anymore, and things had been outsourced elsewhere. So I'm just curious to know how you deal, if at all, with this dilemma. I've thought about outsourcing before, and I'm pretty torn, seeing both sides. And of course, we all want to see people in parts of the world who have been traditionally neglected or whose talents and contributions have not been acknowledged. We want to see, especially those people, thrive. So I'm just curious to know how you deal with that dilemma, if at all.
Well, yeah, so that's a good question, by the way. And the interesting thing is we don't have to deal with that because, especially in our field, in our industry, it's not a zero-sum game. So, like I explained, there are 2 million jobs that will go unfilled at the end of this year. So there's way more demand than there is supply. And so it's not the case that we're cannibalizing the market in another country, but what we're doing is augmenting these industries in these local economies that help them thrive, but also help the employees remotely thrive. So thankfully, that's not something that we have to worry about.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Any last thoughts, questions before we sign off? Going once, going twice. All right. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you, Kennedy, for answering our questions and being available for this interview. For everyone that is watching on this call, please check out our previous video and subscribe to our channel. Also, for people on this call, we are going to be sending out a survey, so if you can give us feedback on how we did and how we can improve for future video sessions, that would be great. And also, if you can think of anyone in your network, like even family, friends, students, people who would be interested in joining or even hosting some of these video sessions, yeah, please ask them to join. This is just a learning opportunity for all of us, and all we want to do is to get people who are trying to do good to stay connected. So I'm going to sign off. For everyone on this call, please stay on the call for 5 more minutes, just so we can just do some brief feedback off the record. But yeah, thank you everyone, and have a great Sunday.